Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Bar podcast, where we dive into the personal journeys behind professional success. I'm your host, Denisa Tova, and today we are joined by family law attorney Brett Ward, who is a partner at BlankRome LLP, and he has a passion for mentoring the next generation of lawyers, and he has some unique interests that I can't wait to dive in. Welcome, Brett, to the show.
Thank you so much, Denisa. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we spoke a little bit, and this is a great opportunity for me to get to know you a little better, and as well as our audience. So, as I understand, your road to law career was really paved by a little high school drama, and I think it involved your mom sitting at the principal's office. Our viewers have to hear this. Could you give us a
Yeah,
play-by-play?
yes, this is a great story. And if my mom was still here, she'd love to hear me say it, since she enjoyed taking credit for my legal career. I was in high school and I did rather well in my classes, and I was placed in AP English. And the school offered somewhat of a remedial law course for students who were not in some of the AP classes. And I had a real interest in taking the class. I think I used to watch LA Law with my parents, and I said I wanted to take that course. And I asked the guidance counselor if I could, and they said, no, this is not a class for you. You need to be in AP English. It's good for your future. It's good for this and that. I spoke to my mother. My mother said, okay, let's go to the school. She let me wait outside. It was the vice principal who would make this decision. She made me wait outside the vice principal office. And as she told me, she went to the vice principal's office and told her that she was not leaving the office until I was in the law course, which they did put me in the law course. I was able to survive with non AP English, and I really very much enjoyed the class, and the teacher was excellent. And it really started my passion for the law. And if from that class, when anybody asked me what I wanted to do for a living, I wanted to be a lawyer.
That is just an incredible story. Wow. What a mom.
Yeah.
What a great way to, celebrate her legacy. So you wanted to be a lawyer. I mean, how did you become matrimonial or divorce attorney for our viewers who are not from New York?
I think there's two parts to that. One is I was in law school and I took a family law course just to, for some interest in it. And I was placed in this clinic, and the teacher, who is one of our colleagues now, placed me in an externship, basically an internship with the Honorable Jackie Silverman, who at the time was the chief judge for matrimonial matters in New York. And I had such a wonderful experience with her. I actually had a summer associate offer in New Jersey for a big firm, but it was quite a trip every day. And I was telling the judge about this, and she said, I don't know if that's great for you. And I walked into the internship the next day, and she handed me a piece of paper and said, please call this lawyer for this prominent matrimonial firm. He'd like to interview you for a summer associate position. I interviewed a few days later. I got the job. That gave me some experience. After law school, I worked for a little while in a boutique civil rights litigation firm that also had some family law, that were just unbelievable attorneys who taught me so much about being a lawyer. And they were both brilliant attorneys. And then one day, BlankRome called and said they wanted to, I had interviewed them. They made me an offer, which quite honestly was about four times my salary at the time.
Wow.
And I would bring my mother into every aspect of this. But when I called her, she said, you're taking the job. And I did. And it's been a wonderful ride since then.
That is incredible. Wow. You represent a variety of clients, including, high net worth clients, celebrities. Do you remember the first celebrity client and what it felt like?
I do. I remember the first celebrity case. I represented the non celebrity. I remember that very well. And then I remember the first actual celebrity I represented. And, it was exciting. It's one of the most difficult parts of this job, which is to respect the client's confidences.
Mm.
The celebrity that I represented for the first time, it was not public information. And of course, you want to go home and you want to tell your wife and you want to tell your friends and you want to tell your family. But the truth is that is a risk to confidentiality. So in some ways, you have to keep it to yourself until obviously it's a public filing or news breaks of this happening. But I think that's one of the challenges, because you're, especially as a young lawyer, you're proud of yourself. You feel like you've now made it, but you got to keep your mouth shut about it.
Yeah, that actually is true. I mean, I can only imagine they have a myriad of the same issues, but on a different scale as just about anybody else going through this process. But added to it is they're dealing with the public scrutiny, and that's another added challenge. And you're a dad, right?
Yes.
So, how being a father would you say had impacted you, how you practice, how you sort of have grown through uh, the practice and how you're dealing with clients?
So I do think that being a parent gives you an additional perspective on raising children. In a divorce situation, people are very emotional.
Yeah.
And what will be in a normal relationship not a big deal becomes a big deal. And being a parent, you can kind of see what are the real issues that are raised in these situations, and what really is a reflection of people's anxiety. You understand that
Mm.
children's you have to be flexible with children's schedules. So when you get a parent who calls you and complaining about the mother or the father are 15 minutes late once in a while, you say it's just, children aren't robots. They don't wake up the second you want them to wake up. They don't get ready the minute you want them to get ready. Okay, these are
Mm.
not major issues. There's also issues that come up with an intact family. When it happens in a divorced family, people think that there's something amiss, but really it's just life. Like at some point, stop wanting to participate in certain activities. In a divorce, the parent who still wants them to participate in that activity will likely blame the other party when really it could just be the child is ready to move on to a different phase in their lives. So being a parent gives you that perspective of, you know, you've got to be flexible when it comes to children. And not everything that changes is the result of the divorce or the fact that you're co parenting.
What a powerful perspective, Brett. I have not heard anyone actually say that. People did talk about, practitioners did talk about how parenthood impacted their practice, but you're right. Sometimes it's just life, it's just a normal course of life. And so, almost like adding yourself into it as a practitioner can, fuel the emotions unnecessarily. It's just is. And so you're right, and you have to have a lot of flexibility, a lot of patience being a parent. Speaking of different type of parenting, you love to mentor
Yes.
young attorneys. What drives you to do that? And can you sort of think of any aha moments, when you mentored young lawyers?
Well, I'm fortunate enough. Now I'm the head of the department at BlankRome. So I have 32 matrimonial attorneys who work with me. I don't want to say, but who I supervise in some respect. And I've been at BlankRome for almost 20 years. So
Mm.
I have aha moments all the time because I have people who were my original mentee. We at BlankRome, we have what we call career development advisors who, make sure that our young associates develop appropriately within their professional lives. Some of those are now partners who are career development advisors. Just now, the New York State Bar Association Young Lawyers Program was moderated by my partner, Morgan Mouche. I was Morgan's mentor the first day. And to see her, she was
Mm.
now on the board of the Women's Bar, and she has accomplished so much and is really a tremendously talented matrimonial attorney of her own right. And every time I see her do anything, I'm incredibly proud. And I feel very fortunate to have these opportunities. Just this past weekend, I was in Philadelphia and I was one of the coach mentors for a NIDA trial program for the BlankRome associates throughout the firm. And it was an opportunity to teach them trial practice. And I just thought that was incredible, and why I do it, why it matters to me. At the end of the day, I don't know what kind of legacy that you can really create being a matrimonial lawyer, but helping other attorneys become the best attorneys they can be is something that is to me a legacy. And it's very, very important to me. It's something that I try to do within the matrimonial field, and also within the BlankRome firm, because BlankRome has basically helped my career in every possible way. And I feel very lucky to have found this firm and be a part of it.
Mm. That is actually great. You mentioned about legacy. What are you leaving behind as a divorce attorney? Yeah, I mean, attorneys with sort of the right focus and understanding what this is about. This is not a job. This is a career.
Right.
And you, yeah, and you really are impacting people's lives, children's lives, in a really very big way. Stepping outside of work, because it's important to have sort of a reset. So when you're not lawyering or mentoring, I know you're enjoying a good wine or whiskey,
Right.
but more as a connoisseur and a collector. Now, I get the wine, but the whiskey, that is so unique. So how did you get into it and why?
It's a good question. I think whiskey, it's something that I think was something that you tried growing up here or there in college. Probably the first time I ever tried whiskey, but I admit, for a long time it wasn't a big part of my life. But when I was, first at BlankRome, maybe even a little bit earlier, but I think first at BlankRome, there's a colleague of mine named Ken Glasser, and he was a real accomplished attorney in the Kings County District Attorney's Office. And about once every 2 or 3 weeks, we used to meet halfway between our offices. I was in Midtown Manhattan, he was in Brooklyn, and there was a place downtown called Brandy Library, and he and I would meet just to talk about our cases, talk about our families. And it was a place that specialized in whiskey. And he and I had enjoyed Scotch a little bit. That's my preference, Scotch whiskey. But and he and I would just go have 1 or 2 drinks, just talk to each other and talk about life and all the wonderful things. And it just kind of became my thing. And I enjoy a wonderful wine. I really do, with a nice dinner. But if I want to have a drink, I like a whiskey is just something that I really enjoy. And then it became something that I started collecting. And I also, one other thing that is a really kind of mundane thing, is I don't like sweet drinks. I don't like
Mm.
juices, and I don't like soda waters and things like that. So a whiskey, it's just what it is, and it
Mm.
has a lot of complexity. Every year they release new ones. Those new ones have different flavor profiles. So it's almost also like a learning experience.
Yeah, that is an interesting way to look at it. What is the most, I don't know if you can say unexpected bottle you found, but so it was not so much you drank it and it tasted like victory. It's something. It sounds like you've sort of acquired slowly and gradually appreciated almost the taste for it. It was something unique. You've learned more about it. Um,
Mhm.
that's interesting. It is something different. I've noticed as we're talking, because you certainly didn't know what I was going to ask you. You seem to be very comfortable, and it's almost like you're a great storyteller. And I recall you telling me that public speaking actually was something that's a second nature to you, something that you really enjoy rather than shy away from. Can you recall the best speech someone else had delivered that really had a profound impact on you?
Um, well, listen, I would say that one of the best public speakers I've ever seen is Bill Clinton. I remember his
Mm,
speech in Barack Obama's, and I have to tell you, I think it was the election against Mitt Romney, where he
mm.
spoke at the Democratic National Convention in this unbelievable, matter of fact manner about the differences in the politics between the two parties. And I found myself, whenever I've seen him speak, both in more of the Democratic National Convention or even on a brief interview on TV, he's such an engaging speaker that I just find myself, whatever he has to say, I'm in, I'm by, get me the popcorn, and I'm going to sit down and watch it. So he's someone who jumps right out at me, for someone who just grasps the audience and pulls them in. And I remember one of the CNN commentaries saying after his speech if I had to have one person argue on behalf of my life, it would be Bill Clinton.
Wow. I guess it's eloquence. It's confidence. I appreciate that. And sometimes it's not even I don't even pay attention necessarily to what, not so much the message, but how it is delivered, right? Because you can have two different beliefs, or many different beliefs, but it's the delivery, it's the being compelling, and the choice of words, and I have appreciation for that. That's great. That's great. Um, you've been on this road to practicing law for a while, and what would you do if you couldn't practice law?
It's a very interesting question. I mean, after all the sports related um, careers were clear that that's not the direction I was going. When I was in high school, I was a very good volleyball player. It's an odd thing, but I played in a junior Olympic program. I played
Oh,
in a beach volleyball circuit for a little while, and I was just ahead of my peers. But then all of a sudden, you get to a point where I'm 6 feet and there's people 6'6", 6'7", and that's just the end of your opportunity in that field. And I decided to not play in college, so that was the end of it. But this is an odd thing, but it's really matrimonial adjacent. But I would go back to school and become a forensic mental health professional. I just think it's very fascinating. I think it really is a good matrimonial lawyer, in my opinion, is half litigator, half counselor. And that's what I say about
mm,
matrimonial law. It's less about being a lawyer and more about being a counselor, okay, both in the courtroom and outside of the courtroom. Because there's so much you can do in counseling your client that will help them in the courtroom. And if you don't do a good enough job counseling your client, it could have disastrous consequences. And so the forensic mental health professional, which are psychologists, psychiatrists, they play a role in the analysis of the families and the psychopathologies of the parties involved, the strengths and weaknesses of the child, the parenting strengths. And, there is the part of that which I find very fascinating. There's also a piece of that which may sound a little bit condescending, which I don't mean to be, but many of these forensic mental health professionals do their analysis, submit a report, and that's the end of it. Okay, there's no one who checks on whether their reports are right or wrong. It's actually impossible to do so, and it's actually one of the reasons why some people question whether this can really be science recommendations about custody, because science has to be a hypothesis that is then tested, and once it's tested it can become science. But you can't follow a family, and if someone recommended the
mm.
mother be the primary caregiver, you can't test it to see what would have happened if the father was actually the primary caregiver, to see if it was the best decision. And obviously, you can't have people following families that were involved in their divorce their whole lives. So there's also part of it, which, it's kind of like being an actuary, where you guess how long someone's going to live. For the most
Right.
part, no one's going to come back and say, whoop, you were wrong. There's an aspect of that with forensic mental health professionals.
Right, so no one can really challenge that. It's a final decision. It's a much needed work,
Yes.
whether in the current form the way it is, but it's final. Yeah, that carries a huge responsibility. Wow. Speaking of that, actually, on that topic, you just made me think of another a question here. Is what is about practicing family and matrimonial law that if you could, you would change?
I would change. There's models like in Connecticut. Anytime someone makes an allegation, in New York, you have these things where we make these motions, and it's these huge written documents that cost thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars every time you submit it to the court. And it's just these competing affidavits, and it's whoever is the better writer, whoever has access to the better
Mm,
information, often will carry the day up until the time of trial. In Connecticut, they don't have those type of motions. You can make a motion to the court, but it's a very small motion, and then everything is resolved in a hearing. Right
mm,
away, someone gets on the stand, takes an oath, gets to be cross-examined, to see if there's really strength and merits to the argument. Too much in the matrimonial world, I believe, early in the case, you can say what you want, do what you want, and there's no accountability until a case gets to trial. And because such a small percentage of cases get to trial, generally there's very little accountability. And you can have an
Mm,
injustice last for years simply because there was never a chance to get the person on the stand and really challenge them. So if I could change things, and if I could do a brief aside, this is one of the things that the legislature is struggling right now with the issues of domestic violence. All right, they're trying to
mm,
pass a law right now that domestic violence doesn't get swept under the rug, and at some point you start dealing with it. They want potentially hearings to happen right away. If this is an issue in the case, let's get it out right now. If it's not real, let's challenge it right away. And if it is real, let's know that. So we're making decisions about custody. When we're making decisions about
mm.
other things involving these parties, we know that this the control issues, the power dynamic is present. And while I don't know that I agree with everything that the legislature is saying is a solution, I love that they want to deal with this right now. And I would love it if we could adopt a model more like the Connecticut model, which is issues are litigated in court with many hearings at the beginning instead of all
Mm.
this tremendous motion practice, which is, in my opinion, increasing the cost of these divorces three, four, five-fold.
Efficiency.
Yes.
That's one of my pet peeves, actually. No, it's something
Right.
that you're obviously it really is something that you're obviously
Yeah.
passionate about. On a final note, Brett, what would be your advice for incoming lawyers?
My advice is as follows. One, obviously, you can't be good at this if you don't learn the law. Okay. There's so many people come in. And when I was a young lawyer, I mentioned that old firm I worked for. I used to go to the partners and ask them a question. And they would say to me, "Where do you think this answer is?" And I would say, "Well, it's in the statute." And they say, "Well, then go get that book and read it." Okay. And I would do
Mm,
that. And when I want to know the answer to the question, I don't go and ask someone, I go and find the answer. And, I
mm,
still do some of my own research for my cases because I love reading cases, even the ones that don't relate to that specific issue, because you're learning. When people write articles in the bar journals and the New York Law Journal, I read them because you're learning. And in this field, if you stop learning, you are at a disadvantage. So you have to
mm,
have a passion for the work. You have to understand that this is a lifetime of learning. You have to understand that this is hard work. And if you don't work hard, then you're not really serving the purpose, which is to zealously advocate for your client. So I think that, I always say, and my last advice is to give back,
mm.
that, not everybody can practice the law. The government has chosen that you have to meet some rigorous standards, but once you do, you get an exclusive right to practice. I think that you should understand there's an obligation to give back to the community for giving you that exclusive right. And you should work on pro bono cases, one, because it's the right thing to do. And number two, because it's the best way to get experience without the real concern that you're going to upset the entirety of the firm by making mistakes, because we all make mistakes. I've been doing this a long time. I still make mistakes.
Yeah.
To me, the key is don't make the same mistake.
Mm. And don't be lazy. Yeah, go get
Don't be lazy.
you get that information. I mean,
100%.
especially in this day and age, right? I mean, it's right at your fingertips. And you're right. I didn't think about it in those terms. It does give you an opportunity to grow constantly, to work on yourself and expand and elevate. And so take that opportunity. Yeah, it is tremendous because there's so many layers to what you do that it just never ends. It never ends. Well, Brett, we will have you back. I always say this, but we just scratched the surface. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your challenges, your triumphs with us today. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Denisa, thank you for having me. And I will say that whatever qualities you want to say about my ability to communicate effectively, it's because you ask wonderful questions and you stay in this process. So I thank you for doing that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's my pleasure. And to our audience, to discover more about Brett Ward and how to get a hold of him, check out a link to his bio below this episode. And do not forget to subscribe on our YouTube channel, Beyond the Bar Podcast. Follow us on all social media links. And until next time, stay inspired and stay curious.